the research is very clear. The more you've made sense of your life, that internal life of your mind, the more you will be able to provide for your children a way of showing up, which means they're seen, they're soothed, they're safe, and they get a sense of security. And it's that sense of security from your relationship that actually builds the grit, the resilience, the stick-to-itness, so that when life gets challenging, they don't collapse.
Hey, it's Heather Chauvin, wife, mother of 3 boys, former social worker, breadwinner, recovering hustler, and stage 4 cancer survivor. I'm not a fan of that term, by the way. Beyond all of these titles and labels, I'm a human being, just like you, attempting to navigate it all while feeling good. My goal on this podcast is to show you that you can live an energized, sustainable life, both at home and in your work. It doesn't matter if you stay at home full-time, if you work from home, you're a CEO, a successful business owner, or trying to find some inspiration. On this show, I attempt to keep it real with stories, interviews, and random thoughts. This is not a business or career podcast, and it's not a parenting podcast. It's both and so much more. You will laugh. You may even cry, and you may even get a little frustrated with the truth you've been hiding from yourself. I believe all human behavior is a language, whether it's through your child's behavior, your health, or a relationship. And when we learn to listen instead of react, we begin to understand what it truly means to feel alive and in control. It's time to put your big girl pants on and find your brave. Let's go. The power of showing up. Okay, ladies, I'm so excited for you to hear today's episode. It is an interview I did with Dr. Daniel Siegel. So Dr. Daniel Siegel is very well known in the mindful parenting world. He has written many, many books. I think he said up to 14. One of the most game-changing books that he's written for me was The No Drama Discipline. And there's Mindsight and so many others, The Whole Brain Child. He gets into neuroscience and understanding how our brains work and how we can parent in a more gentle, mindful way. But what I love about where him and his co-author, Dr. Tina Payne Bryson have gone with this new book, The Power of Showing Up, it talks about how parental presence shapes who our kids become and how their brains get wired. So there's 4 concepts that this book goes through: safe, seen, soothed, and secured. And I ask him in this podcast, in this episode, I kind of ask him my personal questions about parenting, but also this overwhelming concept of conscious parenting and mindful parenting and attachment theory. We can do all the science in the world, right? We can come up with all these theories, but then we could become perfectionists when it comes to parenting. So I ask him about that. I ask him about perfectionism and how that shows up and what we really need to do. And I think this book gives you permission, because somewhere in here he talks about the research of having, I think it says right here, one of the very best scientific predictors of how any child turns out in terms of happiness, academic success, leadership skills, and meaningful relationships is whether at least one adult in their life has consistently shown up for them. Such a huge predictor, right? So I know we can't always control the other people that are in our children's lives, but if we take ownership and responsibility for how we show up for ourselves and our children, that is a huge predictor on your children's mental health, their success as an adult. So just know that the more work you do on yourself, the bigger impact you're making in your child's life. Even if your partner or their other parent is not taking ownership for their life, that is okay, because you are still giving them the recipe for success. So if you want to check out this book, you can head on over to Amazon. It's called The Power of Showing Up. Check out Dr. Dan Siegel anywhere. Just Google him. You'll find all of his books, other talks that he's done. He, to me, is a magical unicorn in this parenting world, and clearly has not distinguished his passion for doing the research and mindfulness and knowing the impact on our children's brain and on ourselves as well. So head on over, listen to this episode, and let me know what you think. You can go to Instagram and find me, Mom is in Control. I want to know. Was it a game changer for you? Did it open your eyes? And what are you going to do from this information that you discovered today? All right, Dr. Daniel Siegel, thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Pleasure to be here with you.
So your new book, The Power of Showing Up, the women in my Mom is in Control community are primed and ready for this book because I talk about showing up all the time.
Fantastic.
What number is this book for you?
Well, it depends. For books I've written, it's, I think, 14, I think. But for books I've written and edited, there's a lot more.
Awesome.
But in terms of writing, yeah, this would be the 14th, I think.
So I have one of your other ones here, No Drama Discipline.
No Drama Discipline with Tina Payne Bryson also. Yes, a wonderful.
Yes, and I just want to talk. Yeah, she's amazing. I want to talk about the difference because I find in the parenting world, I mean, we all are children of parents somewhere, but we have this child focus and then we have the parent focus. What makes this book different?
You know, this book is a synthesis of the science of attachment, which I'm trained in attachment research, and Tina actually did her Ph.D. in looking at attachment and health. And so as people immersed in attachment science, what we do is try to translate that exciting field of empirical studies across cultures for practical use by parents. And the power of showing up is a synthesis of the field of attachment made accessible and then practical in what you do as a parent. And so that's why we're so excited about the power of showing up as a parenting, toolbox, because it gives you the foundations in attachment, which is what builds from the incredible field of science called attachment research.
So everyone's always asking, I get a lot of women asking about, what's the greatest skill or strategy that my child needs to learn to be a productive member of society. I feel like this book answers, like you were talking about attachment and kind of puts a different focus. Do you think one is more important than the other?
The fascinating thing about the science of attachment is that you don't have to choose one or the other. Is it about, relationships, or is it about productivity? Or, the amazing thing is that when you as a parent learn these foundations, you learn, number one, the more you make sense of your inner life and your own emotions and thoughts and intentions and expectations, and the way you understand how your own childhood impacted you as you grew through your childhood, adolescence, and into adulthood, the research is very clear. The more you've made sense of your life, that internal life of your mind, the more you will be able to provide for your children a way of showing up, which means they're seen, they're soothed, they're safe, and they get a sense of security. And it's that sense of security from your relationship that actually builds the grit, the resilience, the stick-to-itness, so that when life gets challenging, they don't collapse. They actually have this fortitude to say, that was hard. I didn't do as well as I should have, but I can try harder, and I'm going to try harder because I can see how I can plan for the future, called a prospective mind, build on my internal compass that guides me there. So I take in other people's opinions, but I also have this internal path that I am self-directed, that it comes from within. And that's what secure attachment amazingly offers, is the relationships where you show up build the internal way that your child can show up for herself or himself. And this is the amazing thing about the science of attachment.
I love this. So I've been doing it right all along. I'm just
I
kidding.
haven't been there, but
I'm just kidding. That's the funny part. People are like, am I doing this right? What if I get it wrong? How do you answer that question?
Yeah. Well, Heather, that's why we wrote this book, because understandably, you want to do the best you can. Excuse me. You want to do the best you can for your children, for sure. And then you get categories like right and wrong. What we wanted to do, and it's always a challenge writing a book, as a clinician or, as a scientist, where you don't want parents to say, oh my God, there's an absolute right and absolute wrong. It's more like there's a direction that you should be informed about. So Louis Pasteur, the scientist, had this great phrase, chance favors the prepared mind. So Tina and I are trying to prepare your mind as a parent so that the chance things that arise, you'll have a strategy you're aiming toward. No one ever does it perfectly. And the reason Tina and I always put in the ways we've messed up is because that's what it means to be human. Relationships are messy, as Ed Tronick beautifully says. And so it's really more about aiming in a certain direction. And then when there's a rupture to the connection you have in going in that direction that didn't work so well, you make a repair. So this reconnection actually builds resilience, because your child sees that, oh, I see life isn't perfect. Nobody's perfect, but you can aim for connection, compassion, collaboration. These ways we join with each other aren't always perfect by any means, so that instead of beating up on yourself, you say, all I need to do really is show up. Mm-hmm. So I have an intentionality for connection that when it's ruptured, I make a repair.
Do people ever get confused with the definition of actually showing up and what that means? I know you were talking about the 4 S's, but someone's like, just show up. Like, what does that actually mean?
Yeah. Well, Heather, what does it mean to you when you hear that phrase? Because when Tina and I decided to use it, we had that exact question that you're asking. Like, are people going to know what that means? When you hear it, what does it mean for you?
So for me, it means, and I don't know if I would have known how to answer this maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago when I became a mother, but now it means like showing up for what is being presented and not being afraid of it. So if it's the messy, the uncomfortable conversations, oh, I screwed up, I need to apologize, the fear or anxiety or behavior that my child's presenting, and even though I want to run away from it, just showing up and going, okay, like, what do I do in this scenario?
Yes, exactly. Well, I think that's a beautiful way to say it. So what you're describing, Heather, is a kind of spaciousness of awareness, so that whatever you're confronted with, you say, I'm going to be here for that. In not just physically, but in my mental state, I'm going to be receptive rather than reactive. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be receptive, so I take in what's actually happening. I can sort it through, make sense of it. And if it's about my child's discomfort, instead of running from my child's discomfort, I stay there with her, with him. I'm there to be present. So your connotation of showing up is exactly what we had in mind. And what we wanted to do then is tease apart these components, because you can learn them as a parent. That's what we do in the Showing Up book, is we teach you the power that you have, that you may not have known you even have, to actually use your mind, the directionality of what you want to do, which means your heart, your heartfelt sense, your intestines, your gut feeling, your head, meaning you're thinking about things, and putting all these together is what we mean by mind. So when your mind is present for your child, that's what we mean by showing up. And you do it, we can go through the S's if you want, but we tease it apart into memorable components, so that when things get tough in parenting, you're ready, because you've got these, not because you've read them in a book, but because you've absorbed them. They've become a part of who you are.
I think that's really important what you just said. I want to make sure everyone got that, of absorbing them and they've become who you are, and not going, oh no, I'm in the moment. Like what page was that again? Trying to find the strategy. It's really about becoming and embodying that. So you talk about these 4, what are they called? The 4 S's in the book?
Well, the 4 S's of attachment, yeah, of showing up. Mm-hmm.
So when I read them, because is it safe, seen, secure, and soothed?
Yes,
correct?
exactly.
Okay. I go back to, what are you noticing in generational patterns of parenting? I feel like in my generation, we're not undoing. We just have we're always unlearning, but we have a lot more awareness than we did, awareness, education. So are you noticing waves in parenting and kind of what's happening with how parents are reacting to behaviors, what's going on? And curious your perspective on that.
Well, it's very interesting. The researchers have studied attachment across the generations. And one thing is to say that if someone hasn't taken the time to make sense of what has happened to them, then they're very likely to just repeat the pattern that was theirs as children, now theirs as they create it as adults who are parents. So that's an important lesson, that you can break the cross-generational passage of, let's say, various forms of non-secure attachment, whether it's ambivalent attachment, avoidant attachment, or the most disruptive is disorganized attachment, which comes when kids are terrified of us as the caregivers. So that's the amazing first finding, to say that whatever the patterns are across the generations, if you take time to reflect on what your childhood was like, and I do this with Mary Hartzell in a book called Parenting from the Inside Out, you can learn to create a coherent understanding where you make sense of what happened to you when you were a child, so that you are no longer a prisoner of the past. So that's the important first place to start. Then building on that, you can say, I got that. I'm going to do Parenting from the Inside Out. That's great. Now, what do I actually do with my kids in terms of how I am as a parent? And in a way, The Power of Showing Up that Tina Bryson and I wrote is a kind of wonderful follow-up to what I wrote with Mary Hartzell, Parenting from the Inside Out, both of which build on this science textbook called The Developing Mind, which I just finished revising into its third edition. So that's been around for over 20 years. And what these science-based approaches tell you with the essays is that, take the first one, seen. Parents, if you look at the research, parents who see the inner mental life of the child, that is, identify emotions, thoughts, intentions, memories, attitudes, beliefs. These are all we mean by the mind. So mindsight is when you see the mind. When we say seen, we don't mean, oh, I see my child's body. If they fall down, I say, get up, your body's on the floor. No, you see that falling down involved fear or surprise or humiliation or anger or whatever was involved. And it isn't that you have to mind read and say, I know what's on your mind, and you don't. But you say, I wonder if that was really scary, that big dog came bounding after you and you fell down and hurt your knee. And your child goes, yeah. And you are teaching what's basically called mentalese, the language of the mind, when you said, I wonder if you were scared. So parents who see their child's inner mental life actually have children who can see their own mental life, see the mental life of others, so insight and empathy, and then can be compassionate and know when things get tough, even if their emotions get overwhelming, they know how to bring them back into balance. That's called emotional intelligence. And knowing about the inner life of other people is the basis of social intelligence. So mindsight that you can teach is what we mean by seeing your child.
So in order, if I'm getting this correctly, in order to be able to really see your child, like their inner world, we need to first understand our own inner world.
Yes.
So if we don't know how to manage our own fear or our own maybe resistance or anxiety, we're not going to be able to form empathy or compassion in understanding our child's.
Yeah, well, it would be, to build on what you're saying, it isn't so much that you couldn't be empathic. It means, let's say your child, the dog is bounding after your child, she's scared, she falls down and he runs over her, and it was really frightening. And you had some frightening experience, or several of them, in your own childhood. So when fear arises in you, just the emotion of fear, you become absolutely flooded and chaotic in how you deal with it because you haven't resolved your own past traumas or unresolved issues. Now, at that moment when your child is run over by the dog, she's feeling fear. She needs you to see her, and then we'll get to soothe next. But in this example, then, it isn't so much that you're not going to be empathic, because you may be very empathic. In fact, you may be overly empathic. You may overly identify with her and feel her feelings and get really frightened, go, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, like that. So people could say that's emotional resonance, but we have a whole concept of integration in this field called interpersonal neurobiology that I work in. And integration would be where you're differentiating and you're linking. So in that moment, the parent could be empathically resonating with the fear. So we wouldn't say she didn't have empathy or he didn't have empathy. We would say there's a loss of differentiation, because while the linkage is there, oh my God, you got run over, there isn't enough of a differentiation so the child feels seen, but also differentiated. Seeing doesn't mean you become your child's fear. So this is where we would say that the process of integration for someone who hasn't made sense of her own life and her own experiences of fear in her childhood or his childhood, he would then come as a father to that and over-identify with the child's fear, and then maybe say, oh my God, you're so scared, when the child wasn't that scared. And it's flooding them, it's intruding on them, the emotions from unresolved issues of my childhood as a father,
And
I give examples.
My dog started barking too when we were doing this. So I was like, ooh.
No way.
Yeah. I was like, I have to put myself on mute. He's freaking out upstairs. I always say parenting is personal growth on steroids, because if there's something we need to identify and work on, like our children will show us because of a scenario like that, when we're over identifying or we're afraid, or it's like we've become that experience.
Oh yeah. I mean, in the book called Mindsight, I there's a chapter called Crepes of Wrath, and all this stuff came out about my own unresolved childhood issues, and my 9-year-old daughter had to kind of walk me through them. And when I'm talking to her about them in this episode of the chapter, she looks at me, she goes, okay, I understand this was your issue from your childhood. She goes, why don't you work it out on your own time?
Don't take this out on me. Do that.
Exactly. Or on her brother, and yeah, for sure. So, look, parenting is, personal growth on steroids. That's a beautiful phrase. And what we need to do, and Tina and I try to really express this, is see these challenges as actually opportunities. Mm-hmm. Instead of feeling burdened by them, feel privileged by them. And you really can change your mindset about that. I think soothing, the second S, is a good example of that, because, while of course you didn't want your daughter run over by the dog and skinning her knee and feeling terrified of the dog, these things happen. It's what it means to be alive on the planet. And so rather than see it as, oh my God, terrible things happen, see it as, okay, these challenges in parenting are a moment to have an opportunity for deepening our connection to ourselves, deepening our connection to our kid, deepening our connection to the overall process where we're teaching skills. That's what parenting ultimately is. And so when your child is now on the floor, skin knee, terrified, and you bend down, get to her level, and give her some space, so you're not going to over-identify with her fear, but you're going to identify the fear and say, oh, I wonder if that was really scary for you. Come here, let me give you a hug. Well, let's look at your knee. Oh yeah, it's skin. It's okay. It's bleeding a little bit. Let me clean it up. And these things happen, and you didn't do anything wrong. And, that was a scary dog. Yeah, that was scary. Come, let me hold you. You're going to be safe now. So all those ways that we put words to the mind, the fear of a skinned knee, the fear of a dog, the fear that I was standing, now I'm on the floor. All these fear-based things you can name to tame, right? Which is this really amazing reality that our language is really important, actually. So one parent asked me recently, why not just say, get down to your kid after they've fallen, in an example like this, and why don't you just say, how do you feel? Well, you could do that, and that would give even more space, because you don't want to say, I know your mind better than you do. But as a parent, you're also teaching how to put words to non-worded things like feelings. Mm-hmm. Feelings don't have words to them. So linking the language centers in the left with the raw emotional centers in the right is a way to integrate the left and right of the brain. And that's kind of what you're doing when you're saying, oh, I wonder if that was scary. You don't have to say that was so scary for you. No, you don't know that. Maybe your child likes to be run over by dogs. I don't know. But you could say, I wonder if that was scary for you, or I imagine that might have been scary for you. So you're not like some omniscient, I know your mind better than you do, but you're saying, I'm a person with a mind also, and I can imagine if I were you, I might have been scared. No, Mom, that was fine. I love big dogs running over me. I mean, that'd be very unusual for a kid to feel it. So this is where the soothing comes from connection. Mm-hmm. The child sees, I can be really distressed at one moment. I can have something happen, in this case, an interaction with my mom or dad, and now I feel better. That sequence, distress, connection, soothed, is exactly what gets imprinted in what's called implicit memory in the child's brain. And she learns, essentially, things can be really tough. I can feel like I'm totally in danger and really hurting physically, emotionally, socially, whatever. But I know, because I've experienced in the past, I can go from distress to feeling soothed. So I learned that that's possible. That gives me inner strength because I know healing from distress is possible. And that's what the S of soothing does.
I love this. Okay. The question that's coming up for me as a parent is, I've been working on myself for a while, and I can see how that has, and I say working on myself, just doing the awareness work, right?
Yeah.
I see how that directly affects how I'm parenting, how I'm being proactive instead of reactive. And in those moments when someone, all of a sudden, I have 3 very different boys. Someone just screams randomly, right? Instead of being reactive, I'm like, okay, I know what's going on here. I have that space. What do you say to that parent that's like, oh my gosh, my child is 15 years old and I've been doing it. I'm not going to say all wrong for 15 years, but I'm learning this new way of being. Have I not, I don't want to say screwed up my child, but like what is going to happen in that child's brain or in your brain when you are trying to create this new reaction, this new way of being, this new way of parenting to shift the parent-child dynamic?
Yeah, beautiful. Well, it's a great question, and I appreciate you sharing. You're doing the hard inner work. We're always working things out. And in fact, John Bowlby had a term, called the working model of attachment. Not like it's a permanent, what's called schema or mental model. It's constantly working itself out. And that's the thing people should know as we get into this question you're asking, Heather, is that, we're always a work in progress. Always. I just was with my almost 91-year-old mom, and, she's working on what's going on in her life now. And, she's fantastic, but she's working on it. We're always working on it. So that's what it means to be human. So let's use the third S to really dive into this example you're asking about. Like what if my child's 15 and I come to a realization that, whoops, what I've been doing isn't exactly what I actually really wanted to do, or, I'm reading Power of Showing Up or Parenting from the Inside Out, and it's not kind of what I knew about to do. And now I'm doing some reflection on my own childhood, and I realize, whoops, I never had made sense before now of the impact of my relationship with my mom and my dad or other caregivers or other experiences I had on strategies of attachment that have stuck with me and filtered not only how I see things, but actually how I behave. And so now I want to come to a new way of parenting. Okay, beautiful. Let's use the third S as an example of that. So the third S is safety. And safety involves 2 components. One is protecting your child from harm. The other is not being a source of terror for your child, which can come in various forms. Neglecting them, severe neglect, terrifying. Getting drunk and coming home and even never hitting your kid or verbally abusing your kid or doing anything else to your kid, but just being drunk, that can be terrifying to your kids. Yelling at your partner, your spouse, obviously abusing a kid or abusing a sibling of theirs, there are many ways. Some of them would be reportable cases of abuse, but many of them are not reportable cases. It's just, you're screaming out of control, at somebody in the house, not at your kid. That can be terrifying to your child when they see you flipping out. So, I call that, flipping your lid. And, there's a whole brain side to it. But let's just say you've been doing that and you realize, as the research suggests, that if you've been doing that to your child, they will unfortunately be developing what's called a disorganized attachment, which is associated with all sorts of things like fragmenting consciousness and disconnecting from your body or other people or memory and stuff like that, called dissociation. So, okay, you come to realize that your child's 15. Now, the first thing for you to do is to really do, the power of showing up and parenting from the inside out. So you give yourself the oxygen first, like on an airplane when they say, put your mask on first, because you've got to make sense of what may have happened to you. And, what we know from the research is that if you've been doing terrifying things to your child, who then basically has two circuits in their brain, one says, I'm terrified, I want to get away from the source of terror, which is you. But the other is an attachment part of their brain, which says, my attachment figure will protect me from things that are terrifying me. I want to go to my attachment figure. So one circuit says get away. The other says get toward the same person, you. And so the brain fragments. You can't take one body and go toward a person, you, the attachment figure, who should be protective. And the other network says go away. You have one body. You can't go both toward and away. So the brain basically stops having a coherent way of functioning. Okay, that's why disorganized attachment compared to the other two, ambivalent, where you have mixed messages of sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not, sometimes they're intrusive, sometimes they're not, and avoidant, which is they're kind of disconnected from you. Those are at least, you can have organized strategies to deal with those. Disorganized means it was overwhelming. You could not organize a strategy. For the parents of those kids, the most likely way that their inner life is they have unresolved trauma or loss. It's quite a robust, strong, that is, predictor that parent, not with trauma or loss, but with unresolved trauma or loss. That's the key issue here. So now your child's 15, you realize, oh my God, I was terrified of my parents. I have unresolved trauma, or someone died, so I have unresolved loss. I didn't realize that. I've been flipping my lid throughout my child's development. I didn't even realize that was bad. In fact, maybe I dissociate or whatever I do. So now you start doing the internal work of the Inside Out book, the Showing Up book. And now you say, well, I'll get myself to therapy maybe, or write in a journal, or talk to friends, or whatever you're going to do to start your healing journey. Now what you want to do is be really kind to yourself. Because as one mom said to me when she first learned about this, it isn't her fault. Beautiful. She doesn't have to beat up on herself. Beautiful. But she said, it is my responsibility. So that's a really important statement she made. It isn't my fault that I was mistreated as a kid and I have unresolved issues, but it is my responsibility to resolve them and now be sure that my relationship with my child is secure, so they're securely attached with me and they don't develop disorganized attachment. But my child's 15 is your question. So what do I do? So the first thing is you really do the inner work, being kind to yourself, realizing we're just human, stuff happens, especially when we're kids, that just impacts us. Do the internal work to resolve the trauma and the loss. Now, as you're doing that essential work, and it's why I never would have written any of these parenting books had I not written Parenting from the Inside Out first, because the research is clear. You can't just do things. It's really more a matter of how you are. And so the first thing in responding to your question is make sure that you learn to be in a resolved state. And as you're on that journey, there are specific things you can do, which is fine, but you need to be doing the inner making sense, resolving journey. And then what you do is you go to your child, and if you ever do things that terrify them again, you name that rupture. My God, when I was screaming, yelling at the top of my lungs, throwing things around the house, or grabbing you by the arm, or whatever the many, many variations of terrifying kids exist, because my God, kids can get terrified. Because we're talking 5 to 15% of the non-clinical population.
Wow.
Like about 1 out of 10.
Wow.
That's huge. Right now, when it's the clinical issues, there's drug abuse or, at-risk people, it's even higher, 80%. I mean, so you can get, this is not like rare, what I'm saying, and so now what you do is you say, okay, I was screaming and yelling, 10 minutes ago. I want to talk to you about it. I don't want to talk to you about it, Mom. This is your 15-year-old. Now you need the book Brainstorm to see how do you deal with an adolescent, because you gave the example of a 15-year-old. So please read that book. But as you're doing that, you're doing your own work. There's a whole section in that book on attachment. And then you come and you say, what I was doing before was not a good way to parent, and it's not how I want to parent. And then your son goes, but Mom, you've been doing that my whole life. And now, since you've been doing your own inner work, you go, something, you're right. Now, this is what's called epistemic trust. You teach them about the nature of reality. They know what's true. Please, please, please do not deny it. Because some parents say, oh, I never did that. Or, oh, come on, you're making too much out of it. No, actually, it's one of the biggest deals when attachment figure is terrifying to a kid, whatever the age. So now you go, something, you're right. And I want to talk to you about this, because I didn't know, first of all, that I could change this. And I was always feeling bad about myself for this. But I realized just recently with a book I was reading, or someone I'm talking to or whatever, that I've got some issues that I'm working on. You don't have to go into the details, but I've got issues I'm working on myself that make me flip my lid, and the brain, and the hand can be put together, or you can flip your lid like that. And now I understand how terrifying it was. Can you tell me what it was like for you both today, what happened 10 minutes ago, and whatever you feel about times in the past? Oh, Mom, you're a monster. You go from being a wonderful person to then you become a monster. I don't know what happens to you. And then you say, tell me more about that. Not, oh, I wasn't really a monster. Oh, come on, don't call me a monster. I'm not really a monster. You're not really going to think I'm a monster. No. You've asked your child, the adolescent, to share what's on his mind. Don't deny his reality. And so this is where the reconnection, the repair starts happening. I've had adult children bring their, obviously, adult parents in, read Parenting from the Inside Out, and do the repair when the child is now in their 30s with issues like this. It's never too late to make a repair. So please don't say, oh my God, there's 15 years under the water, under the bridge. Forget it. There's nothing I can do about it. Too many parents do that because they say, well, this must have been a good way to parent because I'm a good person. Of course you're a good person, but sometimes you don't do good things. So this is the safety issue. And I'm so glad we could talk about it in the context of your really important question. It is never, ever too late to make a repair. When's the time to start? I could say now, which is true, but I would also say start with the internal repair, so that when your child does say, Mom, you were like a monster, if you haven't done the internal work, you're going to feel shame and humiliation and fury. And now you're going to flip out again when you've asked them to open up. And that you don't want to do. These moments of connection are very tender. They're very special. And this is where growth happens, when people can open up and be real. And the beautiful thing is, if you can have that real relationship, that builds the internal compass, which brings us to our fourth S. That builds security, even at 15. And this is what I talk about in Brainstorm. And you've got one of your securely attached kids there.
I could hear him coming.
Hi there.
I'm the youngest. My husband's like, don't go in there. We're okay. Go ahead. Security.
Yeah. So security is basically building a model where a kid can feel like, I want to see my mom, and open the door very gently and assert myself, even though my dad says don't do it. But it's the idea, that you have these experiences of being seen, and when they don't happen, they're repaired. Experiences of feeling distress and being soothed, and when they don't happen, they're repaired. So there's no such thing as perfect any of this stuff. That being safe, and when it hasn't happened and you feel unsafe and terrified, it's repaired, right? Even at 15. And now you start building this model of security, which basically says, hey, when things get tough, this connection, even if it's kind of rough right now, is going to come back and be repaired. And I can take a deep breath, this inner model, what it's called, of security, knowing, number one, with the seen thing, that my inner life is worth knowing by me and by people I'm close to who I trust. Number two, that when I'm distressed, I can, yes, turn to other people to be soothed, but I learned the skills of soothing myself too. So that's soothe. Number three, safe. I can tell when I'm feeling not safe, whether it's socially being betrayed or physically being hurt or sexually being intruded upon or verbally being violated. There's all sorts of ways we get this assault on our integrity. And I can learn, protect my boundaries, and that I'm worthy of being protected, right? This is what builds an overall model, not of entitlement, because some parents say, oh, you should really mistreat your kids so they realize life is tough. No, I mean, that just creates defensiveness and feeling bad about yourself. What this does is it builds not entitlement, but a sense of being self-possessed, that I feel like I'm a worthy person who can engage in mutually rewarding relationships. I can be humble about who I am, but also be assertive about what I believe in. That's what the research shows mental models of security, the fourth S, really provide as children move out into the world. That's what they have going for them.
I love this. I mean, it's giving me a lot of confirmation that even what I teach women when they're like, I need this, this problem solved or this behavior. And I'm like, okay, but we got to roll it back a little bit, right? Like, let's start from the foundation. And the message that I just keep getting again and again is, one, you can't get this wrong as long as you're willing to move forward, right? Learn something new, integrate it, and progress, not perfection. We all, that's part of the human experience, and we can always create connection. You're going to have to get the feedback, right? You might have to get the feedback of what has been done in the past, but when you're open and curious to receiving that and really getting that feedback from your child or someone else and repairing that relationship, it's possible. And to begin again and to apologize, begin again, take those, move forward, but also, integrate into where we're becoming, who we're being. It's messy, as you said in the beginning of the conversation.
Exactly. And, and embracing the messiness of life and relationships and attachment. And yet, even with the messiness, realize you can have a directionality to where you're going. Yeah. Be kind within and kind between, because ultimately this integration process we're talking about of linking and differentiating, these are what build kindness and compassion. And if that's what you want for your child, start with yourself. Bring that out in the way you are, and it's going to be beautiful.
So the power of showing up, how parental presence shapes who our children become and how their brain gets wired.
The power of showing up.
Love it. And this is out January 7th.
That's correct.
Amazing. So where can they find it? Obviously, anywhere
everywhere.
You buy books. Okay,
yes,
cool.
Everywhere you buy books, support anyone you want to support. And here it is.
Amazing. And is there where else can we find you? Do you have any seminars, workshops?
Yeah, well, you could go to Dr. Dan Siegel, DrDanSiegel, lots of seminars. Tina and I are doing a 3-day workshop together, which is rare for us to actually, be there live in person at a retreat center called 1440, right after the weekend after the book is released. So I think it's the 10th, 11th, and 12th of January.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Dr. Dan Siegel. I truly appreciate you and your work. And it's almost like every stage of development or parenting, it's like there's a book for that. And there's something else to learn and to integrate. So I truly, personally have benefited from your work. And I just want to say thank you.
My pleasure, Heather. Thank you very much for the work you do.
According to a study published on Fast Company, conducted at the University of Kansas, women are burning out at an alarming rate, even before having children. And that number rises with the additional responsibility of raising a family. And the gap between ambition and putting themselves in a position for promotion isn't going anywhere. Why, you ask? The world needs more empowered mothers, women who are willing to unlearn everything that they've been taught, women who are courageous enough to feel good and not feel guilty for it. I am living proof that you can feel alive, energized, peaceful, and put yourself on your own damn to-do list and make an even bigger impact in your children's lives and those around you. I want to show you how to think, how to act, how to behave, so you can step into that version of you that has been screaming for your attention. And the best part is, all you have to do is take the next step and invest 2 minutes of your time and book a complimentary call with someone on my team to see if my community and coaching is the right fit for your big vision. The relationships you desire, the money, time, and energy that you know deep down you are capable of creating. So head on over to heatherchauvin.com/let's talk. That's Heather Chauvin, CHAUVIN.com/let's talk. LETSTALK. And take the next step in the right direction. You are here because you were born to make a difference. Taking a stand for how you feel means you are taking a stand for how your children show up as adults. You've got this. Let's go.